Now we're going to talk about short-term effects of exercise. So I'm sure when we've all performed exercise, we've felt the lasting effects, whether that's for minutes, hours, or even days after exercise. The magnitude of these effects is in part due to the type of exercise performed, whether that's anaerobic or aerobic. Anaerobic is exercise that's performed without oxygen. It tends to be high intensity in nature and very short. Think of a 100-meter sprint or a 1 repetition maximum when you're lifting a weight at the gym. Aerobic exercise utilises oxygen and aerobic metabolism, and this can be prolonged. We can perform this type of exercise for hours. Think of marathon runners who are running at a high intensity for 2 hours. Think of ultra endurance marathon runners that are running or cycling from one side of America to another. This is all aerobic metabolism and exercise. We switch to anaerobic metabolism when the exercise demand is greater than the respiration rate. So the demand of the exercise outweighs the amount of oxygen we're getting into the body and around the working muscles. And as a result, when that glucose molecule is broken down into pyruvate and lactate, we get this buildup of lactate in our body, sometimes referred to as lactic acid. And it's that hydrogen ion, that lactic acid, the acidic part of this byproduct, that again causes us to suffer from fatigue and muscle cramps. Now, fatigue is an immediate loss in muscle strength, and it slightly differs from muscle damage or delayed onset muscle soreness, which we'll discuss later in this course. When we perform this anaerobic exercise, for the initial period when we're trying to build up to this high intensity in the absence of oxygen, we need to repay this oxygen debt after we stop the exercise. This is a phenomenon often abbreviated to EPOC, which stands for excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption. And that means that immediately after exercise, we don't immediately stop or cool down, and our heart rate and our breathing rate remains elevated. Think of this as a car engine. When you've been driving a long trip for 2 or 3 hours and you turn the ignition off, the engine will still be warm. That's similar to our body. This has gained a lot of interest in recent years because it may have benefits to weight loss. So think of high interval intensity training when you're performing circuits of high intensity exercises, followed by a short rest period and back into it again. Scientists don't really know how long EPOC lasts. It can last for 15 minutes in some research studies. It can even last for 48 hours plus. But it's anticipated that approximately 5 to 15% of the calories expended during our exercise are burned during EPOC. Let's put that into context. If the average was 10% and I go and burn 500 calories swimming, due to EPOC, for the subsequent minutes or hours afterwards, I should burn another 50 calories due to this elevated breathing and heart rate to pay the debt. Another symptom following exercise that lasts for days is delayed onset muscle soreness. I'm sure we've all experienced that when we've been running around performing sprints on a football pitch, or whether it's been lifting weights. The reason we get this sensation of muscle soreness is due to stretching the muscles. Now that's really important because I mentioned previously that there's 3 different ways in which the muscle can contract. Eccentric contractions were when the muscle elongated and contracted. So actually DOMS is predominantly caused by eccentric muscle contractions. DOMS can last up to 72 or 96 hours, so 3 to 4 days typically, and it peaks at 48 hours. However, the good news is that when we perform this exercise once, this new novel exercise, in the subsequent exposures to it, we tend to be protected. Our body adapts through structural and neural adaptations to protect us in the future. And you may have experienced that yourself. If you've performed a type of exercise and you feel sore, you might perform that same exercise a week or 2 later and you don't feel the effects. That's really important to note in sports science, because if our athlete thinks that they're going to be at risk of injury due to this soreness, we need to inform them that this will only happen the first time. Fear not, if we perform this again, we can condition our bodies to adapt to that stimulus. So it's all about enhancing that performance and reducing that injury risk. There are ways to alleviate these post-exercise symptoms. For example, if you're feeling sore because you've got DOMS, you can have sports massage, you can treat yourself to percussive therapy, so a Theragun, or you can stretch, and that will, in the short term, alleviate these symptoms. You can also alleviate the symptoms of EPOC, this excessive post-exercise oxygen consumption, by cooling down aerobically at a low intensity. That might look like a very slow jog around a pitch, because what that does is it increases the oxygen demand around the body, which increases the blood flow. Therefore, we deliver more oxygen around to the working muscles, which can help buffer against this build-up in lactic acid without being excessive or anaerobic, and flush it out of our system faster. And that's why it's really recommended that our athletes or us individually perform a cool down at low intensity and aerobically after exercise.